I'm just doing some type of self torture right now.
What you got to do is moisturize your face and then put the mask on so it locks in.
And welcome
Some baby oil
to the Down in Front podcast. How's it going, guys?
Oh, yeah.
We are here. We are excited. We are with a huge and amazing group, and we are super pumped to talk about It, one of the newest sort of thriller movies that's been out there that is taking over the box office. So I'm super pumped. I am Warren, and I will be your host this evening. And I'm going to introduce you to some of my friends. And of course, we're going to start with the man of the hour, the person who just looks delicious today. Andrew Abbott, how's it going, man? Good to see you again.
I'm doing good, my man. I am here drinking some Harpoon cranberry. I can't complain. I got my clown makeup on. I'm looking good, looking fly, looking for some kids to kill, you know.
It's typical Monday. It's a typical Monday. Nothing wrong with that. What you been watching?
Well, I just recently watched the new Pirates of the Caribbean movie, which was okay. I do really enjoy those movies. They're a guilty pleasure of mine. Obviously, the first one's still the best one. This one was, I mean, it filled my pirate craving, but it wasn't the best movie, and it was kind of crazy. A lot of good imagery, but not a fulfilling film. But then I also recently watched a horror movie that I found on Hulu called Man vs. That is basically what if Bear Grylls ran into a weird situation in the woods. So basically there's this dude who does a man versus nature type show, and some wacky shit goes down, and it's all filmed in the first person like he's making the show. So my cup of tea, horror movie. Yeah, it was great.
Cool. And so that was, you saw both of those on Netflix? Or where'd you see the Pirates movie?
The Pirates movie, I don't know if I can reveal my source because it may not have been above board.
Fair enough.
Man vs. is on Hulu currently.
Hulu. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Well, as always, it's great to see you. It's great to hear your voice, and I'm really excited to chat about It with you because I know for sure that you were pumped to talk about horror movies. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
To his left, we have the lovely Caroline. How's it going, Caroline? Good to see you again.
I was confused because I'm above him, not to his left.
Not in my orientation.
No. I'm good.
What you sipping on and what you been watching?
I'm drinking Fat Tire, and I just finished the 3rd season of Narcos.
Oh, is that good?
Yeah, it was really good. It wasn't as great as the 1st and 2nd season. That's because Pablo Escobar wasn't in it.
Spoiler alert.
Because it's history. He dies. So we had this conversation, another podcast, when I just finished the 2nd season. I was like, I was so bummed when he died, and everyone was got really mad at me because I told them what happened in real life. No, it's still really good. What's his name? Pedro Pascal. I think that's his name. The actor in it. He plays
the guy in Game of Thrones.
Oberyn Martell.
Yeah.
He's so sexy. Oh my god.
He is a handsome man.
Mostly why I watched it.
He is a handsome man.
Yeah. No. It was good though. I don't know if they're gonna continue on with it. They could. Now they're onto the Mexican cartel. Oh, spoiler. Shit, sorry. Okay. Moving on. Who's next?
Cool. Well, as always, thanks for coming back for this episode. And you are super pumped. And you saw this movie twice in the last few days?
Yep. I saw it again today.
It's definitely good. So that's definitely kind of a good sign, especially coming out from a movie that people kind of laughed at and didn't really like as much. I think a lot of people like the 90s version, but I think this one definitely puts it back, and so you can actually kind of enjoy it a little bit more. So I appreciate you having me on. Over, I have the man with the best voice. By far. Brylan, how's it going, man?
How is it going?
It's going well. It's going well. What you sipping on? What you been watching?
I am still keeping it classy, sipping on my Gentleman Jack on the rocks. I will drink this till the day I die. It's awesome. What I've been watching, I haven't been watching much, but I did catch the first half of the opening game of the new NFL season. And, yeah, it was not good for the hometown team.
I don't think that team played that day. That wasn't a thing. That was real. 0-0. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah, on to Cleveland.
No, you're going to New Orleans.
On to New Orleans.
Same thing.
They're very close.
Yeah, it was disappointing to see them not gelling as well as they usually do. And I only watched the first half because I was getting that feeling like this is not going to turn out too pretty. And then I saw the score the next morning. I was like, yeah, it happened. I didn't like it. So 3 out of 5 less for the NFL opening game.
Yeah, and that game, they had a statistic that said that game was longer than 88% of all MLB games this season. It's not a good sign. It was like close to almost 4 hours for that game.
Well,
so
they just on those special edition Thursday night games, like they I hate those games. I'm a fan of the opening day. Like you get the Super Bowl champion on a day of their own, which obviously we completely messed it up. But whatever. You just get an inferior product that on a day that no one really wants to watch football and it goes on for way too long.
Yeah.
Like a game ending at 12:31 in the morning, like on a night that most people have school or work the next day, is not a very sustainable business model, especially when you get Sunday that they've basically monopolized for for half a year, where you're watching their product for 12 hours. Thursday is just an unnecessary component to it.
yeah, I mean it's I'll be interested to see exactly what happens because I think that was one of the only games that was good within the last 2 years that happened on the Thursday. So,
I'll say one other thing about this weekend. It was cool to see all the rookies actually kind of light it up.
Yeah, that's true. I think almost every rookie, even now, the ones that are playing are now starting, and even a lot of the quarterbacks has already taken jobs from other people. So, kudos to the rookies. Kudos to the rookie. I got my best friend, the sexiest Mocha ever, the sexy Mike. I have Mocha Mike. How's it going, man?
Hey everybody, how's it going today?
Going well. What you sipping on, and what you been watching?
So as for what I'm sipping on, I'm finishing off the remnants of that Apothic Crush from our previous episode. There's not enough in there for me to black out, so I think I'll make it to the end of this video this time.
There were moments last week
I am working on that.
I just the look on your face was just like you just regretted life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank God this is an audio podcast. Aside from the fact that I'm generally not that good to look at, the wine made it worse for sure.
What's special about the Apothic Crush?
Well, the special about the Apothic Crush is its velvety smooth mouthfeel.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That is the special thing about it.
You can drink about 14 bottles of.
Yeah, it goes down pretty quick, pretty smooth, pretty velvety. But that is what I'm drinking, and for what I'm watching, I recently caught up on Attack of Titan Season 2. This is a really popular anime that I had put off watching when it was being released weekly, just because I like to binge things. So now that it's all said and done, I devoured all of it, and it was really fun. It's a really, really well animated anime, a lot of fluid, intense action scenes. But this season, the plot starts shifting from sort of like a general horror theme to more of a mystery, as more elements start getting revealed and more questions start popping up as a result. If you're a fan of anime, definitely check it out. If you're not a fan of anime, maybe not the first thing you should wet your blade on.
No.
But still pretty good overall.
Definitely not the first thing that you should wet your blade on.
Wines aren't getting to him.
Mocha, thanks so much for coming on. I'm super pumped. I'm super excited to not only see you this week, but nerd out on Attack on Titan. So thank you for hanging out with us again.
No problem. It was wet with a WH.
Oh, okay.
Even though I still used it wrong.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
Is that like fat with a pH?
At first I wanted to say like wet your teeth. I'm like, that's definitely not a thing.
Wet your whistle.
Whistle, right?
What's your whistle?
Right?
What was
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Wet your
Wet your
whistle.
whistle.
Both
Maybe.
fast and wet.
Wet your teeth. I'm just gonna wet my teeth real quick.
Oh man. Anyway.
I have one of my best friends ever. We grew up together. We're practically the same person. The Shredder blew it. How's it going, man? What you been sipping on and what you been watching?
So, hey guys, thanks for having me again. I know it's been a week or two. So like Brown, I've been watching the NFL except for that Thursday night game because that didn't happen. I think that we're going to do a Drunken Mike special on this one, but I watched Death Note, and for someone who doesn't watch anime, this is about as far as I want to go right now, because teaser, we're going to probably do a sloppy video or a sloppy podcast on this one. It was interesting. Please stay tuned for when we're a little bit more inebriated. The last thing that I would like to say is I got a little bit into... I had a little bit of downtime about a week and a half ago, and so I was like, oh, I'll treat myself. And so I played a little bit of The Witcher 3 instead of watching any television, and just to sneak a little bit into Brylan's realm here. And it's pretty solid. It's fun, and I hate these games because they're too long and they take forever to actually get anywhere. But it's wicked fun to play. So I'll never be on Twitch because I'm not the mouth of the South. But it was a pretty interesting experience.
Well, as always, lovely to have you back. Thanks so much, Bluey, for hanging out with us. And I am Warren. I'm your host this evening. I also watched Death Note. And I'll put my comments to the side. I'm really excited to talk about how terrible that was. But I also been, and I think you heard me before, I'm now binging and kind of going through more of these Amazon stuff. And I am now up to, I think, maybe episode 3 or 4 of Night Manager. And this show was phenomenal. I think people already had seen it, but I just don't know if enough people have seen it. But it just the acting in the show alone, and just like how they just set things up, and the first episode it ties in very well, and it's just very well acted. And I think you just don't see that enough. You don't see that often. You see it happening here and there. There's maybe one character in this huge sort of plot, but it's a very small sort of cast, and it's definitely very enjoyable. So that's The Night Manager on Amazon Prime. And I am sipping on a new blend today. Surprise, surprise. This one's called Pandemonium. And this has Merlot, Zinfandel, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Syrah, and Malbec.
That's a lot of things in one bottle.
Yeah.
How do you put all those wines in one wine bottle?
Well, when I start wetting my teeth, that's how I end up doing that. So I'm super pumped about that. Wet my teeth. This wine is pretty complex. This is a very different taste. It's a very dark taste, and it kind of sort of transforms after. I wouldn't recommend this as an introductory wine. Like I said, this wine was under $8, and I've been trying to find it. But if people like
you're
more,
under 21, don't try this wine.
No. Oh, no.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Does it have any grapefruit in it?
No, this actually does not have, sadly, any grapefruit.
Too bad.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of bummed. But yeah, so that's what I've been watching and drinking, and I'm super pumped. I'm really excited to really get a lot of people's input on this movie of It. And what we're going to typically do is that we're going to go straight into this entire review. Before we get there, before we talk about all the spoilers, I'm interested just to know about the 1990s version and about the book and about Stephen King, and I would love to hear some of your thoughts on what was your feelings going into this movie. What expectations did you have? Did you even have any expectations? Or what was your thought of just like It, the actual sort of universe before this movie? Abbott?
Yeah, I had a real interesting exposure to the original It, in that it sort of helped to trigger my severe, not quite phobia, but fear of clowns as a child. Right before I saw it, or walked into the living room and caught my parents watching it and saw some terrifying clown shit go down as a child, I have.
They weren't even watching a movie at that time.
Just
they were, yeah. We actually went to the circus for the first time, and let me tell you what messed up shit went down at the circus. I saw a clown get into a cannon, like a child clown, like a tiny little baby child clown crawled into a cannon, and they were going to shoot him across the circus. But then the cannon malfunctioned and blew up, and out of the cannon came an old man clown. And me seeing that as a child messed me up. I was like, they stole that child's entire childhood. He's an old man now. And all those things clicked to me as like a little baby kid child person, and I was terrified. And then I saw it, and that just solidified, like, clowns are bad, clowns are evil, clowns are the worst.
That's not how that's supposed to work.
I always had this thing, and going into this movie, I didn't know what to expect. I was worried it was going to trigger some sort of weird pent-up potential phobia that would re-trigger, and then I'd just leave in like a fetal position, have to get carted out, but I didn't. I enjoyed the movie very much so.
Brylan.
Growing up, I mean, Stephen King's It was kind of, I read it like kind of at the same age that these kids in the new movie are at, and all my friends were into it. It's like, this was like the huge, like, big horror thing we were into. That and like that Scary Stories book as well that had all the creepy black and white and red drawings in it.
Oh, yeah, that creeped me out.
I freaking love that. My mom used to scare the hell out of me with that book on Halloween. In fact, she's probably going to read it to me again, and I'm probably going to run screaming.
Yeah, I mean, those were things we loved, and we loved to just scare ourselves with it. And we were super excited when the TV series came out, and we liked it. I mean, it's kind of got really goofy. It gets silly at parts just because I think in the 80s, TV movies were this weird, like, lesser than a B movie type of thing that no one really gave a shit about. And you wouldn't really get at that out of a TV movie these days. And so, like, even at the end where they're, like, raising the spider heart all this in unison and stuff was just kind of goofy as hell. So we're like, oh, we love the book, but this is kind of meh. But, yeah, I mean, it's something that very much, like, helped define my taste and, like, what I like in horror as well.
Cool. Caroline?
I kind of grew up just looking at the book cover of it for a little while at my grandparents' house. My grandfather loved Stephen King. He had, like, read every Stephen King book. And I think he was, I don't know, he was, like, going through the catalog of King books and, like, talked about it. And I, at that time, I don't know how old I was, but I was definitely like, yeah, people should be afraid of clowns. Clowns suck. So I was always, like, really curious about it. And then I knew there was, like, a movie, but I was still, I don't know, I was pretty young. Then when I was like 11 or 12, got my own TV in my room, and what just happens to be on TV but the miniseries. So watched that, and ever since I've just been, like, super curious. I love Stephen King. I thought the idea of the movie was creepy. Yeah, there were, like, definitely cheesy parts, but it still definitely terrified me as a kid. So I watched it again a couple days ago. I watched it again. And yeah, it's, like, a little cheesy, especially that spider at the end. But it was just, like, it's very nostalgic for me. So I went into this movie excited, not having many expectations, like, hoping that they'd stay, like, true to anything. But they did, like, down to the dialogue. I think that some of the scenes were, like, really true to the miniseries, and I just really liked it.
Yep.
It was entertaining. It was good.
Mocha, what you got for me?
Yeah, Stephen King is somebody who I unfortunately didn't really get a lot of exposure to outside of the TV movies until I was, already older and even past undergrad. I grew up on the TV movies, whether it was It or The Langoliers or any number of his books that were translated. There was kind of like the heyday of Stephen King book adaptations was during the 90s. But the story, It itself, I watched it when I was really too young to remember it. I'm sure it scared me at the time, but I don't have too many memories of it. I tried reading the book when I got older because I could never get out of my head the episode of Friends where Monica tells everyone that every time she reads the book It, she gets too scared and has to put it in the and has to like put it away to keep it safe. And then Jerry puts what's his name?
Chandler?
No, not Chandler. The doofy one. Joey. Yeah. Joey tries to read it because he doesn't believe that a book could be scary, and then he tries to hide it in his freezer so that the monsters don't get him. And that stuck with me, so I decided to read it, and it really surprised me at how legitimately creepy it was. Another thing about Stephen King too is I avoided his stuff. I assumed that because he was so prolific, he was just churning out crap. Turns out he churns out amazing literature.
Yeah.
But I started reading it, really loved the story, and then one drunken night, not unlike tonight, I left it at a bus station on the Green Line in Boston and took the next bus back to go and get it, and it wasn't there anymore. So I was about halfway through the book, and that book is huge. So I got mad and decided to never read it again because I didn't want to. I didn't want to start it.
Did it float? Did it float down to the sewers?
What was that?
Did it float down to the sewers? Who knows?
That book is definitely floating somewhere, and I hope whoever stole that book is floating too. I hope you down a flight of stairs, and now you're floating all over the fucking place. Give me back my book.
Rage.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's my experience with Stephen King's It.
Cool. Blewett, what you got?
Yeah, so I pretty much have no experience. I had a buddy who was like a huge Stephen King fan. I don't think the kid's read more than like 30 books in his entire life, but 29 of them were Stephen King novels. And so I hung out with him a bunch, and like he loved it, but I never could commit into reading through any of them. I didn't have television as a kid, so I didn't watch the miniseries. That's about it. I came in basically knowing this movie was about clowns, and I found out it was about clowns like 4 years ago.
Really?
What the hell?
Oh yeah. No, I had like literally no idea. It was. I went in Warren Jackson style, just no spoilers for something that's already been made before.
Yeah, all I'd say is like, yeah, it doesn't really count. I at least knew a lot. Yeah, cool. Like, I think one of the big things, and this is more along the lines of kind of Abbott, like, this movie scared the shit out of me when I was younger. It really messed me up with his clowns and just anything in general. And my mom was kind of upset. I should be upset at her, but she was upset that she was like, yeah, I'm old enough to watch this movie. Definitely was not old enough to watch this movie. And so I thought it was really, really good. And I think, Tim Curry also had like this crazy, weird, sort of quirky sort of performance that would just creep everybody out. And so kind of going into this, I was super excited just to see this again. I was really pumped to see exactly what they would do differently, what things they would change, do the same. Somebody said that it was going to be a completely different sort of retelling of it. So just looking at all the stuff that you actually kind of hear about, like I know how the movie is I know at least what the movie's about. So I'm super pumped to see exactly how they're going to execute it. So that was like the biggest thing that I'm going in for this movie, to enjoy it. So I'm pumped. I hope everybody's pumped. And what we're going to do is that we're going to give you a brief pause, a brief intermission before we get into our full spoiler-ready review of It. Everybody ready?
Yay!
Yes.
Woo! Okay, let's do it.
Great. Sequel to Moana.
Great comeback. Great comeback. And we are back, and we are super excited to talk about It, one of the newest movies from director Andy Muschietti, one of the retellings, really popular story of Stephen King. And so we're super pumped. We're super excited. We're talking about it. We gave you a bit of intermission, and now we're going to toss it, go straight into our wins, talk about our criticisms and other things that didn't work for us before we end with our grades. So I'm going to toss it over to one of my best friends in the world. We grew up together. He has the best voice in the South. Brylan, how's it going? And what you think about, what's some wins that you got for It?
Yeah, with this version of It, there's a lot of things that I really liked about it. So I think, first and foremost, it faithfully captures the spirit of what the novel's all about, which is facing your childhood fears and what you have to do to kind of face them head on, and wishing that when you're in a bad situation, especially as a kid, that you wanted just something with a face to beat the shit out of it.
Clowns are weak in the face. It's true.
I love it.
Yeah, I think they actually make some improvements over the novel. It's actually really good to kind of like streamline this story and take out some of the more magic and mysticism that comes up in the novel. And I'm glad that they focus on more of the realistic aspects of it and focus on that psychological fear and how it's kind of just manifesting for these kids. I like that it does. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree with you. And one thing I'd like to go a little bit deeper on is that I think that it really showcased that everyone has different fears that can get them to the same level, and how people respond to those fears is different person to person. Obviously, like your kid brother getting abducted and, your dad raping you is like, that's pretty brutal.
Legit.
But like everyone else, like that kid being controlled by his mom as a hypochondriac, obviously, from an outside perspective, not as bad as the first two, but it still can put him in the similar mental state that he can have that objectifiable clown that he still needs to overcome.
Yeah, or Richie's fear is like clowns. I mean, he just hates clowns and just they scare him. And it's to a lot of people's superficial fear, but it freaks him out in that same type of emotional level, which I thought was really smart about it. I also like how they moved the book to the 80s, to the late 80s, kind of a time that I grew up, so I could really connect with the authenticity they brought to the environment, but also the dialogue that the kids used. I remember growing up and just saying your mom jokes to all my friends and just talking about we're going to kick each other in the balls, and I'm glad that they didn't kind of like clean up that language. They just brought it full on in this movie. And I also like that they took time to allow you to kind of learn the backstories of what's gonna be the motivating factor for the Losers Club, and because each person has their own unique take, but what's gonna bring them together as well. As for the characters, I think the big standouts for the actors, Mike from Stranger Things, Finn Wolfhard, it was really great to see him as Richie, also known as Trash Mouth, because every word that came out of his mouth was fucking amazing. When he has that moment with Bill in the sewer, and they're facing Pennywise, and he goes like, "I hate you, Bill. You brought me down to the sewer. You got me into this stupid mess. Now I gotta beat the fuck out of a clown." I think my whole theater clapped when that moment happened. And it was really cool to see him. First see him, you're like, oh no, he's gonna play a kid in a horror movie again. But he was able to be a totally different kid this time, which I think says a lot about his acting skill.
Not to be, I thought he did a great job in this movie, like absolutely stupendous. I think that they should have casted someone else though, because Stranger Things came out last year. He pretty much got hired for this role after Stranger Things, and then we have another Stranger Things coming out, and Stranger Things as a show is 50% Stephen King, 50% Steven Spielberg. And that's not even typecasting at this point. It's like literally he just plays a potty mouth-ish version of the same character. And he plays it amazing. Like, not to take away from the child actor's performance, because they knocked it out of the park. It's a little bit of a brand mixing, when I think that if you're going to have a movie that so closely relates to a TV show that so closely relates to older movies, you got to separate the actors at least.
I'll say this. I don't know if it's necessarily typecasting as of yet, since it's only the second thing he's done that's within the sort of like sci-fi kids getting chased around their bikes mentality. But what I will say is that really good child actors are very hard to come by. And I don't see any reason why someone who does a good job should therefore not be allowed to be in another thing because they did a good job. If you didn't pick Mike, then you get someone like Ty Simpkins or Haley Joel Osment, and then you're stuck with a shitty movie.
Bro,
So I'm glad that he cast again.
Probably they wanted to cast him because they wanted someone that could actually anchor this cast and actually bring together, like, hey, this is how we got to actually get this job done. And I think that was a very smart move on their end.
To be fair, also, you have a kid that you can trust to pull in people. Like, they hired a kid that they know could put butts in seats, which is remarkable to say for, like, a 10-year-old?
I also loved the character the actor that plays Ben. Ben is my chunky brother from another mother. I mean, both hopeless romantics, both bookworms, both wanting. I think his character was, I mean, just like any other the kid characters, very authentic, very well played. Especially like when him and Bill and Bev had their love triangle. It feels like this is something kind of real that kids this age would have gone through. I also like Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise. He actually brings a lot to this character that when I look back at it, I still see like kind of layers of like the creepiness and the menace that he actually brought to it. Like, especially like that first scene when he's talking to Georgie in the sewer drain. You see, I mean, first of all, like a clown in a sewer drain is like a creepy image to itself.
yes.
But having the gold eyes and just that stare he has when he stares at him, just widens his eyes a bit, definitely runs chills down your spine. And the way he talks is like a little mix between Heath Ledger's Joker and Herbert from Family Guy. So there's something kind of amusing about it, but very unsettling at the same time, which I thought was really good. And he has a great physical presence for this type of role as well. I thought like one of the scenes, like I didn't think there were many like things that freaked me out on a personal level, but that projector scene when Pennywise came out, his giant Pennywise,
scared the shit out of me.
Fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Just because you see him coming and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think that's like one of the
slow burn.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the best things that this movie does about its horror elements is you see what's coming. It's there. It's right in front of you, but there's no escape. And that goes actually double for all the kids' actual fears in real life, whether it's Bev's dad or if it's Mike's hypochondriac mom. They're there. They're existing. You know they're there, but where's the escape? It doesn't exist for them yet. And so it's where you have no choice but to confront it and go head on into it. And I would say I was feeling a little frustrated watching this movie all the way through because it's like, you know what, this is only about a 2-hour movie. They're going to wrap up the whole story of it in just this one movie. That's going to be kind of a bummer because the adult saga is just as important as the child saga. And then I see that final title card, and it says It Chapter 1. That made me super excited for what comes next.
I like that title card at the ending. That's kind of like what we get from Marvel of, such and such will return. I think it's a pretty cool but a different way of kind of telling that. So, yeah, I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, and what they did right was make $117 million this weekend.
Yeah, they did.
So it's coming. Chapter 2 is coming.
Yeah.
It's already been confirmed. It got greenlit already.
It got greenlit?
Yeah.
It got greenlit?
It too got greenlit.
It got greenlit kind of like, that happened either earlier today or yesterday? It happened like weirdly late.
Abbott, give me your wins about why you enjoyed it.
Yeah, so something that I noticed right off the bat that I love, like I said earlier, I hate kids in movies. was that the kids weren't safe. Right off the bat, Georgie meets it, and boom, he gets his arm gnawed off. And I was like, I'm in a crowd full of people who are scared, but I want to cheer. This is great. There's already blood on the floor. There's blood on the ground. Everything's great. This kid's already kind of dead. That's awesome. But that's just me. And I love the fact that it was already kind of like a darker color palette than the 90s version, because the 90s version, from what I remember and what I saw, even though it had a darker tone, it still had that like 90s TV, like brighter kind of colored tone to it. And then also, I'm a huge fan of practical effects. Even though there was some CG kind of littered in there, the practical effects were really well done. And even the CG I enjoyed, and it didn't seem overwhelming. I also thought that the movie would be great in 3D, which I don't normally say because I think 3D is a gimmick, but I thought this movie would be extra terrifying with a pair of 3D goggles on your face.
Oh, yeah.
Also, I love the fact that they stressed the fact that all adults in the movies were absolute terrifying, creepy, irresponsible, awful people, because it has this children's book dynamic where it's like once the parents are gone or dead or they just don't care, that's when the kids have fun. But the equivalent of fun in this movie is just sheer terror, and it's a challenge that they kind of have to overcome together. So like they're not going to get help from the people who should be helping them. They kind of have to help themselves, and that works really well. And then, like I said before, the kids' acting was way leaps and bounds better in this version than it was in the 1990s. Also, I did love the fact that changing it to the 80s, they were able to fit in the nod to New Kids on the Block.
Yes.
And kind of punctuating all the horror with these funny little jabs at it. That was amazing. Speaking as a person who's actually seen New Kids on the Block live, I was a little bit sensitive. I kind of felt the sting, but it was very funny and enjoyable. And then also, I think this might be a bold statement, but I think as far as remakes go, I think this one kind of sets the bar. A lot of people are saying it was shot for shot, and I think, in a time and age where we get so many remakes and redos and reboots and it's getting kind of boring, this really handles it well in the fact that you should only be remaking something if you feel like it's going to benefit from, the modern, the advances that we have now, the technology, like the better cast, like everything that was used and put together in this film came together wonderfully. And I think that as far as remakes go, this is what people should aim for.
For sure.
To expand on that, I think that you're right where it sets the bar for, it explains the bar for what a remake should be. Where I think, so take Ben-Hur for an example. Oh. Ben-Hur was made in like the 40s or 30s for the first time, and then they got Charlton Heston involved, and he was, this great actor. They threw a ton of money in it. They threw a ton of practical effects in it. They made it this huge spectacle, and it's widely regarded as like one of the better movies of all time. And then you come in with, not as big equivalent of a budget, with mostly CGI effects starring absolutely no one in the 2016 release or 17 release, and no one went and seen it. So I think that you have to, there's only so many different ways that you can tell the hero's cycle journey. And so you're going to get a lot, like I've somewhat forgiven Hollywood for having limited tales because, again, there's only so many ways that you can tell it, and you can tell like the antithesis of that story. But at the same time, if you're going to say plot for plot, like a redo of it, you better bring something worthwhile to the table, whether it's stupid good effects, or in this case, I don't think that it was necessarily a huge effects, but the cast was remarkably better. It wasn't a TV quality cast. This was an actual movie grade cast with people with pedagogies supporting bigger projects. And so you're right. You have to judge every remake on this. You have to say, well, what is the new thing that they're bringing to the story? Because I know how it ends. I know how the story is going to go. What is the new thing that they bring? And in this case, I think you're absolutely right. It's the cast. The cast was absolutely spectacular. And to see like someone with true range approach this source material was something to be said. I mean, again, not to defend the money grubbers in Hollywood, but people are putting on plays that are 400 years old, that, you know, they run at the Charles Playhouse every single weekend, but you go and see a different actor's take, or a different director's take, or a different producer's take to see, well, what does Shakespeare look like on the moon, or what does it look like when Josh Gad plays, you know, the hunter's best friend. You know, you go for that. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Come on.
For that. That's the reason you see a remake, not just. And you have to tell me. You have to give me that in the previews on what's going to make this different.
Well, yeah, to sort of expand upon what you're saying, you know, when filmmakers put themselves into a corner, like think about movies like Lincoln or Titanic, where you walk into it, you're like, well, shit, I know how this is going to end. And it has to be interesting in between the beginning and the end, and they do that. But with this movie, one thing that I would love to call out is the fact that even Georgie and Bill's relationship, as small of a scene as it was in the beginning when he's making him the SS Georgie, like that is such a more believable brother-brother relationship than what was presented in the 1990s version. The 1990s version is just really schlocky, and again, it kind of goes to talk about how bad the acting was, but like, when Georgie is taken, as cool as it was to see that kid eaten, it was also kind of sad, because you're just like, wow, that sucks. He's probably going to feel like he's responsible. And he does. And he carries that weight like masterfully throughout the entire movie for a child actor.
Yeah. I mean, I even like the fact that, you know, he was faking being sick and everything and all the stuff, because he had like the worst kind of fake cough ever. And I thought people laughed. It was kind of funny, but you didn't want to go outside to play with your brother because you just didn't want to for some reason, and the reason, I mean, now he's dead, and like you said, Abbott, I think that's another way that you can believe these characters. And I know I'll probably get into this a little bit in our criticisms. I'm gonna hand it off to Mocha in a moment, but that's also something that I end up believing these characters a bit more, because, you know, Bev is going through some stuff that, I mean, I can't ever relate to, but like you can definitely kind of believe at least more along the lines of what she's going through, what Bill's going through, what Mike is kind of going through, of his parents literally got burned to death, like, and they're trying to like push out of the door and they can't do anything. I mean, that, you know, there's some horrors that some of these kids have seen that you can't even like try to kind of comprehend. And I like the fact that they took their time of showing us and kind of spending time with those characters. To set up why we should care about these people, ultimately. Mocha, what you got for me? What's some ones?
A lot of the things that I felt really positively toward for this movie were already touched on, but it still benefits from reiterating, you know, we're in a renaissance of child actors right now. I can't remember a single period of time in my, you know, however long I've been watching movies where child actors were just really good, like really, really good across the board. And that was fully at play here in this movie. Every single one of the kids, not only in the Losers Club, but also the other groups of children, like that psychopath who had a police officer for a father and his friends, you know, the bullies. They were all just like really convincing in their roles. In ways that a lot of adult actors have problems with. So I was really impressed by that, and I hope that we continue to see that, and that film casting execs don't just settle on children just because they're a child to put in the film, and keep looking for these quality actors and actresses. The visuals were really, really delightful, and the movie was thoroughly creepy. Like from start to finish, there were really maybe only two moments in the entire 2+ hours of this movie where you had a chance to relax and breathe. You know, like the moment where they're splashing around in the quarry, and then maybe like another moment when they were in the town. But for the most part, there was something horrific happening every single scene, and each scary moment was creepy in a completely different way. And they did a lot of things that just reminded me of what it meant to be scared of things when I was a kid. Like, you know, it started with little Georgie going into the cellar. I used to hate going into the basement when I was a kid. And the fact that he sees like the reflection on those light bulbs or whatever, and he imagines a monster being there. It just reminded me of what that was like. When
I still hate that. I still have to do that to do my laundry. And I will run up the stairs tomorrow after I do my laundry.
Oh my God, that feeling that as you're running up the stairs, something's going to grab you any moment.
Yep.
The worst thing is, like, if you go into your basement and you're the only one down there, if it's kind of dark, you're hearing your own breath. And that kind of just freaks you out as well.
That's unsettling.
I can't remember the name of the child, of the character. Maybe it was Sam. It was the one who was the son of the rabbi.
Stanley.
When he goes into his father's study to put away the Torah or whatever it was, he walks by that creepy painting and he just like, he stops and he just covers his face and then walks forward. And that's just like, I don't know. It just reminded me of being a kid and like, you have to do something, which is as simple as crossing the room and you're still trying to act tough in a way. So you just like cover your eyes, but still it's like this childish, just like almost nonsensical fear that just wells up inside you when you're young and have an imagination still. That just like, they really affected well. Also, all of the things that scared the kids, as you guys mentioned earlier, they each had their own fears that were being preyed upon. But it was really interesting seeing how some of those manifestations played out. I was really intrigued by Beverly's character, because with Beverly's character, when she has her really horrifying moment, it's that amazing scene in the bathroom where everything gets covered by blood. The hair comes out of the sink and grabs her face and holds her down. And then blood starts pouring everywhere. And that was really subtle and deep in my opinion, because if you look at what that character was afraid of, or what we were told she was afraid of her father because she was being molested. She was in the midst of having her period, which is probably a strange and like scary thing for a young girl who doesn't have a mother or a female figure in the scene to help her with that. Especially being a young girl who's being, like physically abused and raped by her father. She's now like having her period, which means that she can get pregnant. So, and like that, in my opinion, was what was like signified when her hair, the hair that she cut off because it's what her father liked about her, grabs her and holds her down in a way where she was restricted and can't move her body, and then blood starts pouring everywhere. All of that tied into what was established with this relationship with her father. And it was super dark if you look at it through that lens.
Yeah.
And I just thought it executed really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that I was like pretty pumped and pretty excited about seeing, like how they execute in this movie. And that right there, I remember I didn't get that from the 1990s version of it at all. And I really love your analysis of that part, Mocha, because that really did, like, it was already messed up that she was like really the only girl, and it was still kind of creepy of what was happening in that particular scene. It just wasn't right, and now it's even heightened it to that level of this is why you care about those characters, and that's why that those boys, all the boys kind of banded together and wanted to accept her as one of their own, like as not as a loser. So that was a great point on that one. But
yeah, not only were the scenes themselves and the visuals really scary, there was some fantastic music and sound design throughout it, which I'm sure Blewett can do a much better job of attesting to than I can. But there was some really good music throughout. Shout out to Georgie's mom for just chilling in the living room playing the creepiest music possible on a piano.
Oh, that was so strange. That was so weird.
The fact that they transitioned that into actually being the music in the room, because it kind of changed the feeling of the scene in the moment. Like at first you thought you were just listening to a soundtrack, and then next thing you know you're seeing the mom playing the music, which sort of transports you as the viewer into that house, and you're actually there with him, which makes it a bit more intense because he's heading into danger.
But the way that they executed that scene, though, that was almost as if, because I had people laugh in my audience, and that was a comedic bit of the music that's going from something that's in the background to like now in the foreground. If why are you playing that ominous music when it's terribly raining outside? Like that sort of stuff there that people laughed in my theater, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, is that what you meant to do? Because it's going to come off as being funny in a part where your kid gets his arm bit off. Like, that didn't match. Yeah.
It is supposed to be funny, that you get that sense that like everything is ominous and it really builds with your expectations, and then all of a sudden you get the shot of just the mom innocently playing probably some terrible etude that no one cares about on the piano on a cold, dark, dreamy day. Like, it could have been anything. It could have been more heavy-handed and been like Mozart's Dearest Aries, and like I think that it really drives home the point that it's all about setup, tension, and release. In this case, the the release was seeing you get built up like, oh, here's this terrible music, oh my god, something's bad's gonna happen, and then all of a sudden you have nothing. It's the mom playing, and then the kid walks outside and something terrible happens. It really messes with that usual flow.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, like, I know in the theater that we were at was like two of the greatest horror film experiences of my entire life. I saw Annabelle Creation like a week ago, and so that movie, whatever. Like, Caroline liked it more than I did, I think. But it wasn't that. These two
throw me under the bus.
The best part of that movie was these two Asian ladies screamed bloody murder, like the loudest I've ever heard anyone scream in a movie theater, and it was the funniest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And then when we were watching this movie, like, people were just yelling at like, something scary would happen, and someone would just, like, after everyone kind of like did the startled, they just just like, fuck that! Like, they were just like this, just all by themselves, loud, and the whole theater just like erupted in laughter. So there's this weird binary that humans have, that when confronted with this horrifying thing in front of them, their natural reaction is to scream bloody murder and then laugh about it once their brain finally catches up and realizes it's not real. And so for that fact, I think that it's perfectly acceptable. Like, what if the mom was playing The Entertainer and you see Georgie and it's raining outside and all of a sudden you hear da-da-da-da-ba-da, and then Georgie walks down the stairs, goes looking in the basement, he's like, oh, that's scary. There's no dramatic tension to that at all. The whole point is you build dramatic tension, release it. Build dramatic tension, you release it. In fact, I think in horror movies, there comes a moment in every horror movie when you are no longer scared. And it differs. You have that one moment where the good guys kind of figure it out, and then at some point they start showing the evil creature or the bad guy or the serial killer, whoever, in more of a light. They actually illuminate that person and he's out in the open or she's out in the open. And then you as an audience, it kind of comes into like an action movie, where like they have to execute their plan and go on. And there's movies that play around with that paradigm and that don't necessarily follow it, and those are some of my favorite films in this genre. But for the most part, that's the case. And so I think that constant battle really, it was exemplified in that scene of just like build up, release, laughter, build up, release, laughter.
I mean, I can see that, and I can definitely understand like the subtleties between like the comedic bits and like the horror bits. It was just some of these things just didn't work for me.
Aside from from the music and the way they handled all of these creepy scenes, they also did a really good job of depicting kind of like the feel of pre-iPhone summers. Like Brian mentioned that too, but this is back in the day when you didn't have school, and so what did you do? You just went outside and you either caused trouble or ran away from trouble. It was one or the other, and I kind of got that feeling with them always riding their bikes and hanging out outside, and they made a point to mention that phrase, like, it's the summer, you should be outside, over and over, which it's kind of funny because it highlights the disconnect between the ineffectual parents and the knowledge of just how dangerous like the outside world is for these kids during this movie, and kind of like furthers on that theme of how useless the parents are in Derry. But it's true, and I think it came off really well. I just think it felt really fun, and and in some ways I feel like this movie was almost better as a coming of age story than it was even just a horror movie. You could almost separate those two elements from one another and still have interesting movies on both ends. I'm also really glad that they left out some of Stephen King's weirder elements. Again, I didn't finish the story, but I do recall that there's a lot of talk, not just in this movie, but in a lot of Stephen King's movies, about like creation myths and about like more like the metaphysical, supernatural aspect. We didn't get any sort of like talk whatsoever about the turtle that vomited up the world. We didn't get any direct reference to the fact that Pennywise is this cosmic being called like the Deadlights, or one of the Deadlights. We got like a nod to it when he hypnotizes Bev and she sees those like orange lights floating around.
Yeah.
And it's a turtle made out of Legos.
That's true, yeah. And they talk about the turtle in the quarry. Like, that was a nice little nod to it. but they didn't go any further, which I'm totally fine with. I think they did a good job of cutting the fat from his book.
Yeah, no weird seances, no ritual chud, all that stuff just cast aside.
Yeah, and ultimately all those things pulled together and had me really excited for part 2.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether, like, when they were going to get to the adults storyline in this movie, just like Brylan, and I was really thrilled to see it Chapter 1 come up after the credits had rolled, because it clearly they're approaching this adaptation with a lot of intent and a lot of meaningful care. And the fact that they separated things that way, I don't think it was done as a cash grab. I mean, obviously, anytime you make a sequel, set yourself up for a sequel, you're giving yourself another opportunity to generate revenue. But I do think that when they wrote the screenplay, they looked at it and said, "What's the best way we can tell the story? We have to cut it in 2 and hope for the best." And I'm glad that it had such a record-breaking weekend, so that we can see that. But yeah, all in all, I thoroughly enjoyed it in a way that I usually don't enjoy horror movies. Yeah.
Cool. Caroline, what you got?
I have nothing else to say.
Okay.
I feel like everyone covered it all. Just kidding. I went into this movie hoping to be terrified, and I think like that first scene with Georgie's arm getting bitten off definitely met my expectations. I think that if I were a kid now watching that, that's a scene that would stick with me for a really long time and like traumatize me a little bit.
Yeah.
He just because he just looks so helpless, and like what a disturbing thing to see a 7-year-old's arm getting bitten off and scramble for his life. Like, yeah, that would have scarred me as a kid now. Like, honestly, like E.T. definitely scarred me a little bit as a kid. and back to like Stan's like walking by the picture of the lady playing the flute and like covering his face. Definitely with E.T., like the VHS out on display in my living room, I would definitely be like, don't look at that one. Okay, Lion King. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so as far as like traumatizing and scaredness goes, yeah, that movie got me. I definitely did a lot of my usual horror movie watching mannerisms, which is like a lot of nervous laughing and like jaw dropping, like, I cannot believe this is fucking happening right now. So I was excited about that. I think my favorite character, or maybe just actor, was definitely Eddie. I know in the miniseries, I always thought he was really funny because of his, like, you know, hypochondriac tendencies. I always thought he was just kind of funny. Like, it was such like an old man way to like live your childhood. And I think the actor that played him was hilarious. I did not think about Stranger Things when I saw this movie. I totally disassociated myself from that. I don't think I even knew that the kid that played Mike in Stranger Things was in this. So sorry you guys had that experience,
Richie.
but the kids were hilarious. And I think that their comedy, it was like pretty classic with their age. And I don't think it was, I don't think it took away from the tone of the movie. I feel like those kind of matched up pretty well. I know with the 1990s version, I'm thinking of the actor that played the adult version of Richie in that movie. It was just like way too much cheese, and you kind of forgot like what you were watching. Especially like when they're like all sitting down to like have a Chinese buffet dinner as adults, and it's like a happy montage scene. It's like totally took away from what was going on. But I felt like the comedy and like the yeah, those classic 80s montage scenes that took place in today's version fit pretty well.
That montage scene, that entire scene in the Chinese restaurant was terrible. It was awful. This entire thing was just terrible. Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, I went back to see it again today. I think that was mostly to see if I could like catch anything from that I missed before. So I know that I did appreciate the like subtle hints to the miniseries and things like dialogue. Some of it was pretty word for word, and I appreciated their kind of nod to the deadlights. I know they don't explain that at all in this movie, but people that are fans of the old definitely got that.
Blue, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I thought it captured the main feel pretty good. Like, everything was kind of open and you needed a bike. You couldn't just, like, walk everywhere. As someone who's lived in New England my entire life, like, that's kind of how it was growing up. So, you know, visually, like, landscape-wise, they really knocked that out of the park. I have no idea if they shot this on location or not, but it looks like they did. One thing, you know, moving in a little bit, I thought that they did a really good job having dated, goofy effects, and that was a good thing. Like, Pennywise dancing in his little cage looked awful. No other way to say it. It looked terrible, but it fit so unbelievably well that it just absolutely worked. Or like when the chunky kid is walking around looking for the eggs, and the headless kid starts chasing it. It looked Jason and the Argonauts level claymation stop motion bad, but it worked so perfectly well. And then with that little cut to Pennywise yelling at him right before he runs into the librarian, it was like perfectly well done. I think that if the effects were like better and smoother, it would have taken away from the overall creepiness of it.
I think that was creepy. How bad you think it was, to me it was like, that's what made it creepy.
I agree.
The twitchiness of it.
I think if it was like better, it would have been worse. You know, it's one of those like things.
Yeah, did y'all notice like the librarian that hands him the book? In the background while he's reading it, she's like standing and like has this weird ass smile on her face and like hunching her shoulders over as he reads.
No.
It looks so creepy.
Librarian to do.
I did not notice that.
No, I didn't notice that.
I thought they did. So, a couple last things. Most of the stuff has already been touched on, or I've touched on it in other people's things. I thought it was pretty nice. They did a fairly slow build to the villain. Like, they had that one coming out scene in the sewer system, but for the most part, they kind of offered him like Pennywise in the background until the end. You know, halfway through the movie, and I thought that was like fairly efficient in building fears. I know that's a pretty common horror trope, but not a lot of people do that right, and I thought they did in this one. And then in like one last thing, I really like that they didn't really beat us over the head with anything. Like other people talked before, I thought the comedy was pretty natural, and it sounded like 7 kids hanging out in 1980s through current day America. I thought that they didn't really like beat us over the head with, hey, fear is the central motive, until kind of later on when the kids kind of discover that. And then you're like, oh yeah, that is kind of what binds them all together and what binds them to this monster. They really did a great job of not overdoing it, and for that matter, it made it feel more lifelike. Like, life never comes at you straight ahead. Life never says like, this is the mean monster wearing the William Shatner mask. Please run away from him. And so I think that like they did a really good job connecting with people as people. And like, ironically enough, fear was the main villain, and fear was the thing that they were trying to convey. So it kind of makes it easier. But it worked natural for me.
Cool. I think everything of all my wins has been talked about. So I'm super pumped. I'm super glad about it. I guess the one thing it says that I think Caroline even brought this up of, I think Brylan said his favorite character is Ben. Caroline, your favorite character was
Eddie.
Eddie. I think my favorite character was probably Pennywise in this actual show, in this movie itself, because I just enjoyed how crazy and how was weird. I really feel like I feel like the director really told Bill Skarsgård to just to do whatever. And it really had a lot of weird, kind of creepy scenes, and there's a lot of kind of creativity. Ways to show, much like Blue was talking about, like different points of like fear. I just thoroughly just enjoyed just about how creative that it was, and that was pretty awesome. So that's kind of the only different thing that I would say of. That's a win that I did enjoy. So it's cool. So I'm excited to talk about our criticisms because we talked a lot about wins, and I want to start with our special guest Abbott of some things that didn't work for you. Because I'm sure that this movie was not perfect.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's perfect. Kind of going off of some of the things Blewett was talking about too, with the way certain scenes were shot. That goes back to more positives I have about this movie. I definitely have more positives than negatives, but there was no Stephen King cameo. I was waiting for him to pop up. That was unfortunate. I wish he could have popped up, and like he could have been the creepy pharmacist. That would have been great.
Oh, that would have been good.
Although that guy did a really good job.
He was the guy by the van.
He had the same glasses as Stephen King normally does in way back when.
Yeah,
he looked kind of Stephen King.
He was like Stephen King's stunt double. Also, I felt like there was this weird hole left where I do agree that the Skarsgård that did Pennywise did a good job, but I still feel like you can't beat Tim Curry. And in my mind, as far as clowns go, it's kind of this weird like Nicholson, Ledger, like Joker kind of. He did it first, he did it best, but like there is a spot in my heart for the performance I just saw. So as good as it was, I still feel like Tim Curry's the man. And then also, again, going back, I feel like it should have been an option to have it shot or seen in 3D. I would definitely go back and see it in 3D. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
And also, this movie should have come out next month. Honestly, come on. It's a month away from Spooktober. It's an October movie. I could have waited, but I'm glad I got to see it when I did. So it's not, again, most of my criticisms aren't harsh criticisms. They're just kind of like nitpicky little Andrew things. So That's all I got.
I thoroughly agree. I do have a like that. I do agree with you, Abbott, that I think a lot of these jump scares they put in this movie should have been made for 3D. For sure. Especially that scene that we were talking about when they were in their garage and the weird projector that was happening and Mike kicks it over and it's still going. Like, I think that entire sequence probably, like, that would have been phenomenal because he pops out of a literal screen. And I'm surprised that they didn't do this in 3D. Let's toss it over to Caroline.
Oh my god. They should have taken that kid to the frickin' ER.
So,
like, Eddie had it right. Have you heard of staph infection?
Well,
Do you know where that kid's knife has been? Do you know where that rusty fence post has been? That was nuts. Eddie got taken to the ER because he had a broken arm. How about the kid that was bleeding out from the abdomen?
well, I mean,
told in the late 80s, hospitals didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, my mom would have been so pissed at me if I was just like, oh, it's nothing.
I guess the thing
My
that
mom would have never found out. I would have hurt myself and come back to my house like 3 days later, all stitched up and healed. No way! I was letting my mom see that.
So,
I feel
look at
bad
my
for
H.
him.
here's my issue that I had with that. Like, my issue that I had with that scene is
He's
like,
being a tough guy.
Yeah.
Are we talking over each other?
No, go ahead.
Sorry.
You got it.
Yeah, it was like he was being a tough guy. He's like, oh no, it's fine, whatever. But like, while it's like also gruesome for your body, very traumatizing as well. It's not good for your mental health.
Well,
Someone should have gotten him help.
I'm just surprised that they're all freaking out when they're like cutting on him.
And they can go beyond that. It was good.
Yeah.
It's just crazy that they were freaking out when
He's
he
still gonna
cut him by his knife. And everybody was like freaking out and like rushing and getting all those supplies, and they showed like put in the movie if they literally stole the supplies, they had to create a diversion to help him with this cut. and they want to make sure he's okay. Whereas he has this gash. He's like literally leaking out of his skin. That clearly that was a deeper wound than the actual cut itself. And then you had Richie who makes a joke about it. I'm like, are we not doing anything about this? Like that's.
He said he was leaking hamburger helper. God,
Can't waste that stuff.
There were so many good lines in the movie.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, that I don't know. That just says like an adult to me, my adult perspective. Adult.
But that
It's freaking me out.
That also plays into like a really major theme of this whole the original book too, which is that the adults are useless.
Yes,
They're
I agree.
good parents, and the fact that this poor kid has like some kid's initial carved into him, and no one actually notices. Like definitely plays into that.
Yeah, but I'm saying like they could have easily patched him up like they did before. They could have been putting the same gauze and like put bandages on him instead of like literally just standing in the middle of the street having an argument about it. Like that doesn't make it frustrated me because they spent the time to establish this is what the character is, and then they weren't consistent with that throughout the entire movie.
Maybe they shouldn't have stabbed him again. I don't know. It also made me feel like a wuss. I was a little jealous because I got stitches like a year ago for the first time in my life, and I was like a real big baby about it. And this kid's getting like tortured, and he's like, "No, I'm fine." So maybe I was just like a little salty about my reaction.
Maybe you still are.
Yes.
Cool. Mike, criticisms? Blew it?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, I think the biggest thing was that for me it was the fact that they hadn't confirmed a sequel. Now, obviously, it made a whole boatload of money, and now they have confirmed. But they realistically opened a lot of plot holes that they didn't really even touch on. Like they kind of alluded to the horror, the origin that the horror of Pennywise was. But I would have loved to have touched on a little more of that, and then made part 2 the comeback, where you kind of know all the details, and then you think that the kids or then adults have a reason, they know how to beat them, so think it'll be easy, and then they have a loophole there. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to have more history on the different characters. We got that in some cases. I think that the character, the farmer, or the one with the sheep, they didn't connect him well enough. Like he kind of seemed like this random run-in character that you weirdly also spent a bunch of time with. Like I almost wish that they didn't have a whole backstory, because in the end, I feel like the sheep killing thing didn't really have anything to do with it. Where he basically had a motivational speech given to him by his grandfather that said, "All right, well, you grab it by the balls, or you get your balls grabbed." And that really spurred on the whole rest of the movement, where the kids were like, "Okay, well, we have to go do this, because if not, it's gonna come after us." But as a character, as a group of people, they had 2 outsiders come in with Bev and Mr. Chunky. I have no idea what any of these characters' names are, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Wait, who's Mr. Chunky?
The fat kid.
Ben.
Yeah, sure, fine. I'm going to forget that.
Chunky?
Chunky.
I thought it said Junkie.
So Redhead and Chunky, are the 2 outsider characters that got introduced and got incorporated into the group, but they felt really natural. They had a common bonding moment over bullying, or they were kind of in the same class or something. But they kind of really forced Farmer Boy into the storyline, and I think that for a remarkably well put together set of interactions, that one felt very weak.
His name was Mike.
Okay. Yeah. So again, I'm gonna forget it in 3 seconds. I know that we're supposed to be some sort of, expert on the movie that we're, doing, but apparently I suck.
No, just because your name is Mike. That's all.
Can I say something about that real quick?
Sure.
I feel like, Warren, that's something that you didn't like about it, and I agree. And I think that it is like kind of a bummer that all these characters were so established, and then Mike kind of felt like an afterthought. Whereas in the original, he was the one that, and I don't remember if we talked about this already, but he was the one that did all the research on the town of Derry, and then later as an adult, he's the one that sticks around and like finds out that like, you know, all of this is happening again, and like he calls the group back together. So it was kind of a waste.
That would have been much more sense if he, as an independent person, was the one to find out all of them, and they had to like go seek him out, rather than Senor Chunk. He had his own arc, and then he also had this, like the library arc, and it was like, no, just keep it to one thing. It was great, the whole triangle of romance they had going on there. Yeah. There was no need for him to also be the Brainiac.
Yeah. I like that assessment of it, Blue. That's what I was going to bring up. So thanks for talking about this, Caroline. Is it, you know, the only thing that if you could talk about these characters, Bill, we know tons of stuff about Bill. We know tons of stuff about Bev. We know a lot of stuff about Eddie. And then it's a huge, and Ben, sorry, and then we know a bunch of stuff about Ben, and then it's just a huge drop-off because we don't know anything about Richie or his family or any of his backstory, and all we know is that, oh, hey, it's a time in the movie in which we have to get together. Oh, I'm afraid of clowns too. Okay, that's like whatever, right? So we get that really kind of, they just threw that actually in there. We get like Mike's backstory just from an exposition dump, but we don't really get, like, I mean, your family burned in the fire. That's a huge thing that happened in this town, but then why are you homeschooled still? Like, that's kind of, like, that doesn't make any sense, and we don't get any of that information. And then the only thing we get from Stanley is that he doesn't study when he's trying to go to his bar. Like, I think the first line that we see them walking through the actual school was talking about his bar mitzvah and how he stopped studying, and you know, they could have easily brought it up to the fact that, hey, that book is in your father's office. So you avoid your father's office because you're afraid of that painting. And so that's why you don't study, because you don't want to go to your father's office. But they didn't give a shit about Stanley. They didn't give a shit about any of these other characters. They just talked about 3 or 4 people that they thought was going to be the most important. And I really hope they just even it out a bit more of this shouldn't just be one main character, much like the 90s version was. It really focused a lot on just 1 or 2 people. It really needs to be more of an ensemble of talk about how everybody faces their fears and they figure out all this stuff kind of together and they're growing together. But it was definitely heavily favored just 3 or 4 characters. And it really bothered me because they rushed that, and then near the end they just didn't really care, so they rushed that too just to talk about the characters they have, and then we still got a whole other arc of Bill and Georgie again even after that, and hopefully we can see something happening with Bev, but then for some strange reason she's like hypnotized and she's basically taken out of this movie for some time. And so it just blew me away some of the choices that they made, not to make it even, and to give everybody like their equal credit on the actual movie. And it was kind of frustrating. I was really kind of tired of seeing that. Mocha.
Yeah, actually that's a great segue, Warren, because my biggest criticism with this film, or most of my criticisms, fall under one umbrella, and that umbrella is that there were time constraints with this story. Stephen King is notorious for writing particularly dense, long novels. It is no exception. That book is pretty thick on its own. And there just wasn't enough time in the film to flesh out more elements like the other kids, give us more reason to care about, about each of them, or at least the ones that were focused on less. I also thought that they could have done a much better job of going into more detail about Derry's long history of tragedy. They make reference to a lot of the tragedies. We see the grisly flip book that Ben goes through in the library. We get reference to the Black Spot Massacre, but they don't really go into the detail of it. And that's one of the really scary things about the book. It is that Derry has this town where these terrible events keep happening every 3 decades or so, and everyone there who's an adult just wants to ignore it and keep going on with their lives to live continue living their quaint suburban New England life. And I think that's important to just adding to the general horror element because it creates this sort of unassailable villain. You know, it's not just that Pennywise is supernatural and terrorizing you right now. It's that he's been doing it for centuries. So what are these little kids going to do about it? You know, and unfortunately, there just wasn't enough time, right? This movie was, I don't know how long. It was over 2 hours, right?
Yeah, 2:15.
Yeah, 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's a lot already, especially for a horror movie that's relying on maintaining a high level of tension throughout it. So I get why they didn't go deeper into it, but I do think that it would have made things a bit better.
Yeah, the big thing in the book with the adults is that they forget what the memories are. Mm-hmm. Very similar to something eating their past. Another Stephen King thing.
So yeah, that's actually that is a significant part of the story is what happens when you start to forget things that you thought you'd never be able to forget. And which is why, personally, I think that the first movie should have been the one to really get into the audience members' heads. What are these horrible tragedies that have gone on? Because when the kids, when we go back to chapter 2 later on, who knows what their memories are going to be like when they're adults? And so I think, and I don't think they'll have the time to go into it for that second movie. So I wish they had done it here. With the kids too, you know, I feel like they strategically chose kids to focus on more than others based on what they expect to come of those kids when we get to the second chapter. Mm-hmm. I won't go any further than that because I'm sure there are plenty of people who are listening to this podcast who haven't read the book. But I see why they made some of the decisions that they did, even though I still think that it should have been even across the board in terms of content.
Yeah.
And yeah, ultimately, like my final thing with this is that while it was extremely creepy, every single scene had something kind of disturbing about it. I don't think that at any point I felt truly scared. There's a difference between a jump scare, there's a difference between being creeped out, and there's a difference between going home and just not being able to like get that thought out of your head of like, oh, that was messed up. So I feel like this movie wasn't really a horror movie. I mean, it definitely was a horror movie, but it didn't horrify me, which I wish could have been the case. But that may also have to do with the fact that I'm familiar with the content already and was prepared for it. So that one's a bit flimsy. But ultimately, my biggest criticism is that it needed more time to build itself up.
Now, and you said for more time, are you saying that this should be a longer movie, or they should break this movie up into 3, possibly 4 sections?
I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to see. Well, I don't even know if 3 movies would be entertaining. I'd say longer. Give me a longer movie. Give me a movie that's 2 hours and 22 minutes. I'll hold my pee and I'll make it through it and I'll be satisfied.
Hold my pee.
Brylan, what you got for criticisms?
I did have some criticisms with this movie, like there was and I think Mocha put this in my mind, just like being more mindful of what's going on, especially with like in the Defenders, that Jessica Jones image you kept on showing me.
Yeah,
I actually picked up on some scenes in this movie, and it wasn't like the Pennywise special effects, but it was like Stan standing in a doorway looked very out of place in a couple scenes, and it's just like maybe he wasn't available and they had to shoot him like in a green screen in his kitchen, and then they just like superimposed the background on it. It looked really weird at some points, and I was like, did they just forget about these shots to actually get them developed as well as the other shots? The other thing is, like, I kind of wanted to see a lot of reduction in the CG for Pennywise and like just have Bill Skarsgård do his thing, because he was showing that he has a physicality to kind of bring this menacing, silly creepiness over, especially like when he's shot with the cattle prod, when his eyes go away from each other and come back. That's all him. He actually did that on his own. And it's not like I wanted to see Bill Skarsgård like kind of unfurl himself from a refrigerator. I don't know if that's humanly possible, but give it a moment. Give it a moment where he could have actually kind of used more of his own physicality to actually make the character his own. I think would have been really good. And then, even though I've read the book, I know how this story folds out. God damn it, Ben was so smooth in this movie. He should have gone with Bev at the end. And God, I mean, come on, Bev. He wrote that nice poem for you, and he actually woke you up by kissing you, and like you got out of your catatonic state from his kiss. You kiss him back.
Did you guys see her pamphlet on her piano of the Frog Prince?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I didn't. That's an amazing detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end, Bev, Ben's sadly walking away from Bill and Bev, and then Bill and Bev have their moment of kissiness at the end. I'm like, come on, give my chunky brother Ben a chance at some love. That's all
I'm with you, Brylan. I'm with you.
Yeah, man.
I mean,
That's some bullshit that Ben did nothing, or Bill did nothing through the show or through the movie for Bev, and still wound up getting the girl just because he was the quote unquote traditionally, classically attractive one of the group.
I think Bev should have had a scene where she makes out with legless Betty Ripson.
I love how your wig changes, by the way. Thank you for that.
I wanted to mention was that I think Pennywise could have actually been more menacing if he had a couple of rules to him. I thought it was a little too convenient that Bev was like captured out of her apartment. And I think if you made Pennywise limited to that he could only interact while connected to the sewers, you could have had a more interesting character that he can cause fear whenever you're in your house or going down to your basement. But he can't really grab you until you're near that sewer, so he has to kind of bait you in, type of thing. So, and I think that would have made more sense about how he's kind of gifting Henry the Switchblade.
Yeah,
as well.
I really like that point. I think the way that I saw that scene is when first of all, did Bev kill her father?
No, she just beat the shit out of him.
No, he died though from his wounds.
I mean, you saw blood coming out of his head.
It could go either way.
I wasn't sure. That's just a question. I'm not sure.
It was definitely ambiguous.
No, at the end of the movie, she has to go away to an orpheage. What are you talking about?
No, she goes to her aunt's house.
She goes to her aunt's
to her aunt's house. Excuse me. Yeah, because her father's dead.
No, I thought that was
because he's molesting her.
Well, I mean,
it's not a good place for her.
I just thought it was weird, but she straight up hit him on the head with the top of the toilet. And I was like, that's.
I agree, Warren.
That sounds like a Friday night in my house.
Is that an upper decker? Does that count as an upper decker?
I thought the body count was 3.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's okay. I mean, I definitely wanted more deaths, but, we'll get into that a little bit later. But I like that call out, Brylan, because I felt like they had sort of established something at first, and then they kind of threw it away partway through to give more scares. And, why is he coming out of, I like the creepiness of, as Ben is looking through the books, right? And, he starts seeing these weird things. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing to do about a sewer or anything. Here just randomly popping up. And he did that before. He would randomly pop up in certain areas. And I see that. So the reason why he popped up in Bev's bathroom is because she just knocked her father out. And she was then alone at that point. And that's why he was able to kind of get her there. But... there's a lot of things, and I'll talk about my criticisms in a moment when you're done, but there's some things that I felt like they tried to establish and then slowly just threw away just for the sake of a plot or a movie. And I was kind of bummed about that.
Yeah, it kind of forced, going to the next scene
that.
And, I mean, just to add on to that, putting Bev in the damsel in distress type of scenario. Did she really need to be a damsel? Probably not.
She's already single.
I think they could have still had enough. They still have enough motivation to go down into the sewers without one of them being in that dire strait.
Yeah, why not kill her? Why keep her alive? And then if that's the case, are all the kids that are floating?
He feeds on both fear and flesh.
Yeah, but if all the kids floating up there, are they all still alive? Why are they not dead already?
No, they did.
Yeah, they did. They did.
So, I mean, so I guess I'll get into a bit of my criticism. I'm not going to try to take up too much time here, but I think kind of going off of it, I was really trying to go in with zero expectations because I know that the 90s movie, as cheesy as it was, I thought it was really good. So I really just want to see a succinct kind of storyline and from what happening. We talked about Ben getting clawed and how for some reason he was fine. And didn't faze him at all, but Eddie broke his arm in like 6 different places, and they were freaking out about that sort of point. So that was weird. I think like one of my biggest things was, you know, they established the rule in the movie of we shouldn't be alone. We should not be alone. You should not be alone. And they learned this part in the movie of you should not be alone. And they go to that house, and they know they shouldn't be alone in this house. And the first thing that they do is split up, and they are alone with themselves. And I'm like, we just and the same thing with that from the house. They go into the sewer, and they know once again they're not supposed to be alone. And the first thing that we see happens is Stan is going off of being alone, and Bill running off for being alone. And I'm sitting here like, I don't know, and I really want to kind of toss this to you, everybody here, is it frustrated me because it felt like it was just a kind of common, that's just like an 80s movies trope, but I thought they were getting away from that at least, because they were at least learning some of his parameters and what they can necessarily do. And it made me angry because it just felt like they were just being dumb characters, and they were just being dumb for the sake of being dumb for jump scares and things that actually happen. Whereas other stuff that could have been more effective.
I didn't see them actually getting super split apart. They were like 3 steps away, and then the house does its quantum displacement, and like they're in cube 3 hypercube.
Nice call.
And it's I mean, I thought that was actually a really neat effect that it showed like kind of like how scary Pennywise can be, is that you could be right next to your buddy, and if you just blink away 1 second, gotcha.
Well, I also thought it really exemplified that they established a rule: we can't be alone, and then they also established that his power to persuade people based on their fears was enough to defeat logical thinking. And so every single person was in that mind space that Warren's in, where like, hey man, don't go in there, don't go in there, don't go in there. But it really exemplified that, like, if you were in that circumstance, you would lose you. Because everyone's done stuff in their life that they think like, I would never do this. And then like a week later, it's like, I don't remember grinding my feet into Charlie Murphy's couch. Yeah, I remember grinding my feet into Charlie. It's like we all have those stories of like, I would never do this thing except for that one time that I did this thing. And it's the same thing with these kids where they all know, hey, we have to stay together. We have to stay together. We have to stay together. Oh my God, it's like my little brother that just that I haven't seen, and he's probably dead, but like I need to have closure. I'm gonna run off on my own. We've all been there, played on a very basic human interaction.
Well, I guess my thing. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Just also, quick shout out to Mike. My dude Mike understands the rules when it comes to horror films. White folk always want to split off, and then people die. Minorities never want to split off, and he never does. He's always with the group in that movie until like he's the last one to go down the rope, and then he gets separated. But that dude never once says, "Oh, let me go down this doorway and just see what's over here." Nope, he sticks through it, and he makes it out alive. So big props to him.
Yeah.
Anyway, kids by their nature are dumb and curious, and those are 2 things that kind of like, I understand your criticisms there, Warren, but ultimately, like, they kind of serve their purpose, and they're also in that age bracket, like 12, 13, where they're like, oh yeah, I'm not a kid anymore, I'm an adult, I should be able to do this on my own. And even though they know that they've agreed we're all friends and our friendship is the magic that's going to beat this monster, it's still just like, well, I'm going to be the one that's going to beat it, or I'm going to be the one to figure it out. And so dumb, curious kids thinking they're adults, I think that sort of explains away that, like, that weirdness, but I do see it as being kind of like a peeve as well.
I mean, I guess my thing is to, like, cause I always, if I'm trying to give like these criticisms, and I got just one more too, if I'm trying to give these criticisms, then don't make it, they shouldn't solve the fact that they need to be alone. They probably should get to that conclusion the same time as, hell, we figure that he preys on when we're alone, so let's band together in the sewers, and then we know that he plays on our fears. So, like, just don't have them solve the fact that, hey, let's not be alone, to then give me 2-3 scenes in which everybody ends up being separated and are alone. That was kind of really, really frustrated me, because that's we could just do without it. Like, don't have them learn that, and they still get like messed up. Because Pennywise should be like mainly in charge and in power. He's not going to lose to a bunch of kids, right? So I just think that was kind of weird because and key example, right? Here's an example, and more along the lines against what Blue had talked about. They're going down, right? They're going down the sewer. At one point, they're going down the actual well. And you got Eddie, Richie, and I think Bill are in like that tunnel, and then Mike is up top, but Stanley is standing in the actual sewer himself, not doing anything. And he's already by himself, and we don't know why. And it cuts to him, and that's when the thing starts attacking to him and bites on his face. So that has nothing to do with any action that causes him to go down there. He's literally just standing alone by himself, and we just established the scene before in the house, or 2 scenes before in the house. So there's no action with that, sort of scene. I think it's kind of weird. But that's just one of the examples that happened so quick in that actual time. Let's talk about our lasting thoughts, and let's get into some grades. And let's talk about what we think about overall 2017 version of It. Mr. Abbott?
Yeah, I was going to give it originally like a high B, but then hearing everybody's kind of input and thinking things through, I think I'm going to give it like an A, not an A- or an A+, just a straight A. And it's just because I went in there with zero expectations. Like, I didn't realize it was the same director that did Mama, and I love that movie too. And it does great things with kids, killing them, kind of. And I think one of the things that Mike sort of talked about was there were scenes that were shot kind of weirdly, which were more successful for me because it actually goes back into these old school horror movie techniques where it did look like a Ray Harryhausen animated, like, creepy walk, or even like the Headless Kid, or It kind of like walked all disjointed, where it's like, oh, he's not just a clown, now he's moving like a puppet, which I don't know about you guys, but like puppets, especially marionettes, are creepy as shit. So it just kind of like compounds those things with these little tiny like hints here and there. But then also there were so many Dutch tilt shots in that film that it was just like perfect, because you're just like, oh, what's wrong with the camera? Because we don't see it that often anymore, and it was like used masterfully in this movie. So yeah, I'm giving it an A.
Cool. Caroline, what you got?
I think I'm gonna give it a B+. I think I was originally thinking A. Like, when I walked out of the theater, I was like, yep, that was an A+. Yeah, but I guess after talking things through, some things stood out to me, and I didn't totally love all of them. I think I loved just like how nostalgic I felt watching it, and then was just really impressed about how it was more of like an improvement, I think, than a remake. Some plot holes, I guess, were a little confusing, but overall, I'd say B+.
All right. I'm surprised. Yeah, I thought you were gonna stay strong with your A, like especially watching it twice. But I don't want you to. I don't want to deter your grades at all in any of these comments. But it is what it is. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's toss it over to the sexy Mike.
That's me.
Yes.
I was kind of confused on that one.
Yeah, I will be giving, similar to Caroline, this film a B+. It was so much fun, nonstop. The dialogue was great. The acting was great. The reminiscence of just like better days where things were simpler was great. And there were thoroughly creepy scenes that kept like a consistently high level of tension throughout, which I thought was impressive for a movie that was 2 hours and 15 minutes. But ultimately, I don't think it was truly scary. It was more of just a connection of creepy scenes that had a narrative built into it. And ultimately, I think it was better as a coming-of-age movie than a straight-up horror movie. I feel like this was more Stand By Me than it was.
I love that.
But yeah, overall B+.
Brylan.
I'm going to give it an A for Abbott. And And I thought it was a fantastic retelling of the first part of this book, and it got me excited to see what comes next. So in 27 years, I can't wait to see the sequel.
They're just gonna play themselves in the future, aged normally.
That'd be
yeah.
amazing.
That'd be a hell of a long con.
It's possible.
It's like your contract is for 40 years. Deal with it.
Blewett, what you got for me?
Yeah, I got a B. I thought that there was a lot of things that were going right with this movie. I thought they blended horror and comedy pretty well. As it turns out, though, it wasn't particularly amazing in either of them, which is knocking it off that one of those end of the year movie lists. One thing that I would love to note is this is not the first Stephen King movie to come out in this area of the year, and it really drives home what a good cast with a good director and a good script will do with a movie compared to Dark Tower.
Yeah.
Dark Tower was like a horrid piece of garbage, and it really just underscored that if you put people in the right positions, they make a remarkably better movie.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool though if there was just the same way that there's a DC movie universe and a Marvel universe, there was a Stephen King movie universe where it's all interconnected?
There is.
I mean, that's
the whole thing with all of Stephen King's novels.
Castle Rock is where it all takes place around.
But if they actually started tying all these movies together now that they're actually going to be good, apparently.
It takes place in Castle Rock?
We don't know that because literally the movie that came out a month and a half ago was hot garbage.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just counting it.
Okay, oh, yeah.
Well, spoilers for a 35-year-old novel. Stan, it's led to believe that he has the shine. Huh. That's why he's kind of really quiet and reserved.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that don't they sort of hint that doesn't Bev see the future, kind of?
They all saw the future because she saw the deadlights.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It'd be interesting to build on, and I feel like that Stephen King's done a marvelous job from, again, what we started with this review with what my buddies told me about this, where he doesn't outright say it's exactly the same universe, but there's a lot of similar characters that keep on coming up under the exact same name, and a lot of the same themes that come up in mystical artifacts and crap. Bev and
Richie show up in 11/22/63 or something.
Yeah, they could do a pretty gnarly good extended universe, but they have to start making consistently good movies under the same director.
Well, the big shame about that is that if you were going to go for a Stephen King extended universe, the Dark Tower is the crux of that universe. That story is the most important, and it sets up the fact that you can travel between each of these dimensions or points in time or realities that make up his whole book series. So they started off and trashed that, which means that the linchpin is already the weakest part of this entire extended universe.
Tower's falling.
I want to see a Langoliers reboot. I need the Langoliers.
I was thinking the same thing. I remember that one the most when they're on the plane and stuff. That was another TV special.
So we got Blewett is
that
B.
one traumatized the shit out of me.
So Blewett with a B. I am also going to give this a B. I liked the movie. I was thoroughly enjoyed with it. I just felt that I guess it's also going to be dependent on who they cast, but there is clearly a more focus on what they think more important characters are, and I think that's going to continue to happen in the second part of this. It was kind of a bummer because it was interesting to see how they did some of the characters in the 90s and they changed it, and I'm interested to see. I can understand why a new kid going to Derry would know all the history of the Derry, but I can't quite get why he'll know everything about Derry and nobody else. That's just kind of weird. So I gave it a B. I thought it was good. I thought I really love the Pennywise character of it. I really love some of those graphics that they actually kind of use. I think it was really impactful, but I just think that they kind of I think they literally thought they were running out of time. They just kind of cut a couple corners, and it kind of bugged me a little bit. So yeah. And with that, we will say Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out with the Down in Front podcast with our special guests as we are hitting a milestone, and everybody would love to raise your glass of whatever that you are drinking, of hitting 5,000 downloads this year. So thank you very much for everybody listening in on us. And with that, we will sign off and say, Abbott, where can we find more of your work?
You can find some of my artwork on theabsman.com, and you can also go to theabsman.tumblr.com to look at some of my daily doodles. I haven't done in a while, but also if you want to see some Sleepy Kyle memes, I just posted those on the internet. They'll be floating around for a while, probably on Instagram. # Kowalski Couch Collection.
Love it. Caroline, what about you?
My bathroom wall. Otherwise, pass.
I need some context.
Come on over, buddy.
Where can we find you?
No, I think I showed you a picture when we were at Clover.
Yeah, you did, but I mean, for everybody listening, what are they going to think that you put on your bathroom wall?
They just have to come over.
Caroline,
Just kidding.
General invitation for everybody listening.
Entire audience, come on over.
Mocha, where can we find more of your work?
Yeah, you can find me tweeting about all sorts of nonsense on Twitter at MochaMike, L-I, as the Lord intended. I would love it to be at MochaMike, but unfortunately, the 92-year-old gentleman who has that username spends all of his time trying to lure little children into sewers and dark places, and none of it tweets. So unfortunately, I don't have it. But until then, you can reach me at MochaMike, L-I. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I post a lot of my photography work. That's instagram.com/@MochaMike. And medium.com, where I post some long-form reviews as well as articles about just things that generally interest me. That's medium.com/@MochaMike.
Cool. Blewett, what about you?
Hey guys, you can find me at My News Music or My News Band on most social media platforms. Check out our sweet EP. It is absolutely free. We don't have it connected to a PayPal, so you could not pay for it even if you wanted to. It's mediocre at best. Also, you could check me out at Jesse Rand Dancing Clown at ymail.com. He's available for all your children's party needs. He will show up in a little smock with a little face paint and dance for your children.
It's very sensual.
So weird.
It's only sensual.
It's age appropriate, but it is very sensual.
it's age appropriate sensuality. That's gonna be my new song.
Brylan, what you got for me?
You can find pics of this sweet new letter A I got carved into my belly. Thank you, Mr. Abbott. On Twitter at Brylan, BRILUND. You can also see me post like mini movie reviews on Instagram at I am Bryland, and I am the host of the Gamescast. We try to meet up every Thursday around 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and I actually stream some games and talk about them. Right now we're playing Life is Strange. It is getting really dark and really twisted right now.
It's a fun game. It's definitely, I thoroughly enjoy hanging out with you on that, so it's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And we are the Down in Front Podcast. You can find a lot of our work. We have an email. So our email account is downinfrontpodcast@gmail.com. We have a Twitter. That's @_DAFP. It stands for @_Down-in-Front-Podcast. You see a bunch of our tweets, promotion materials, lots of stuff that we're going to be putting more and more content out. So definitely thank you for that. We have a Facebook also. So facebook.com/Down-in-Front-Podcast, where you can see a bunch of our work. As much as the stuff that we post on Twitter, we try to do Facebook and Twitter a lot. And then definitely for anything of our, we have our YouTube videos and our teasers that we're going to be putting out as well. So check that out. We'll post a YouTube video link in our actual show notes and all of our history. You can see a bunch of the game casts and a lot of the other materials that we're trying to come up with. Also the actual future events and the future movies that we're going to be talking about. So definitely check us out and definitely subscribe to us on our YouTube. And do we have Patreon? So patreon.com/Down in Front Podcast. We're literally just as much as $1, Bob. job. Will definitely be able to help us out for anything that we're necessarily doing of going and watching these movies, definitely getting together, getting the equipment together, and really kind of recording and just having a great time, just kind of hanging out, sipping on some wine. So that's definitely going to be patreon.com/Down for Podcast. For any other reviews or any other questions, feel free to kind of find us on the Apple Podcast. We're on Stitcher. We're on the Google Play Store. Leave us reviews, rate us on iTunes. That will be amazing. The more and more we can get more of our content out there, it'll be the better suited for us, so we can keep doing this and having a lot of fun. So thanks so much for everybody hanging out with us tonight. Thanks so much for our review of It, and we will see you soon for a review next week of Mother. See you later.
Bye.
Float on.